Hello and welcome to Warped Miniatures. Here on the channel we're going to be talking about 40k content, but today in particular we're going to be talking about the Ultramarines list that we built and kind of made some strategies for in the previous video. But in general we're going to talk about what units what we liked, didn't like, how they performed, how we're going to take them out or put some new ones in, and what our plans for those units and certain stratagems and secondaries included. But giving you kind of an overview first off how the tournament went. It was an 18-man tournament at Recess Games over here in Cleveland. Great host at the shop. They're a huge shop, one of the most successful in not only Northeast Ohio, but the country as well as far as hobby shops go. But great tournament, and the opponents were tough. Even some of the opponents that had 0 wins at some other shops might have had 3 wins. They were it was a very competitive tournament to get the point across. But the opponents I faced, I had 2 wins and 1 loss. The 2 wins were very close. I played into the strengths and kind of the overall strategy that I wanted to. Not everything worked, but enough of it worked to get some wins. The loss I had was not close. It was complete stomp fest where so much shit hit the fan. I couldn't just look back and say, oh, that's what lost it for me, or that unit was the one that lost it for me. If I would have changed this or that, there was just so much stuff that I had to really take the weight of that loss more than the weight of the 2 wins when changing this list up and taking a mindset forward with it. But the tournament was great. The loss in particular was against a Raven Guard opponent. There was a lot of mobility, and that accentuated the point about my biggest weakness with mobility in this list that we were just manifesting. The units that I wish would have performed so much better for me but did do well: Invictors, Redemptors, the Hellblasters did great, but I didn't get enough usage out of them, and I almost something moving forward that I'm going to keep an eye out is if a heavy variant or even an assault variant might be better for how we're going to use them. We're going to be combat squatting them now. So instead of having one 10-man unit keeping alive at all costs with transhuman physiology for 2 CP, we're going to be combat squatting it and splitting them into 2 5-mans to make it harder for our opponent to kill them off and cheaper for CP usage, and also stretching the board more often. And I might even use them as backfield objective holders as well, which really they're going to be a better variant as a heavy Hellblaster at that point. But assault Hellblasters are amazing even if you don't overcharge them. 3 shots per person at a strength 6 -4 AP with the damage is pretty good. But some other things to note: CP usage was plentiful. There was never a time when there wasn't a stratagem I wanted to use. And often by end of turn 2, I exhausted most of my CP. Added of the Codex refunded a couple, enough to make it worth it to have it. But you'll see moving forward, we no longer have Marnius. We replaced him with a Primaris captain that's more of a shootier variant. Speaking of replacing stuff, the Apothecary is no longer in there. But you're also going to see, in addition to a Primaris Tech Marine, kind of replace that support role in a way. And we're just going to kind of like modify the list in a way and also look at secondaries as well. So the secondaries, we had engage in all fronts while we stand, and the other one we left kind of up in the air. Typically it was going to be assassinate or bring them down against our opponent, but we're going to be scrapping while we stand because we don't want to force ourselves into the Calgar and full unit of invaders, or have to do a full unit of Hellblasters as well. We can combat squad it, which you can combat it squad before, but it wasn't as efficient with transhuman physiology, which we need more CP. A few more things before we finish up with here and move on. The other opponents I faced was a White Scar player with a bunch of Vanguard veteran jump pack units. I was able to go first, and it really helped me because I pointed my Invictors right at those, knowing that they are some of the best units in the Space Marine Codex. And I was able to go turn 1, go first, and pretty much shoot them and neutralize them for the most part. But he also brought a couple of Redemptors and a lot of Chaplains on bikes, which the Chaplains on bikes were, I think, his highest performing unit, and something to watch out for as a White Scar player is those HQs. But moving on, we have the Necron player. The Necron player brought the Silent King, some Warriors, and a Transport. It was kind of like a mixture between an elite and a horde type army. I was surprised that the Silent King, his shooting wasn't that great, against me at least, and his durability himself wasn't that great, but I was surprised in his fighting potential, and I was surprised mostly by his auto-explode 1 CP strat and his built-in ability being some sort of HQ of some sort. But the Silent King did 19 mortal wounds to my army, and if he would have, and he rolled from those 19 wounds, he rolled 7 units, and 3 of those 7 units that he rolled for, he rolled 1s. So if he would have rolled, he could easily rolled 6 or 7 more damage and changed the entire fate of that game. It was that close of a match. Silent King is very strong. Not as strong as I thought he was in some ways, but he's still strong as I thought he was overall from just different mechanics. But a very interesting unit. A lot of different unique things that he brings to the game. But those are the 2 opponents I faced that I won against. The opponent that I lost against was a Raven Guard player, as I said earlier. But the Raven Guard player brought a completely different list. No vehicles compared to the other 2 opponents. And he brought a bunch of Centurions. I believe 2 squads of Assault Centurions and 2 aggressor squads as well, both flamer aggressors. He brought a Blade Guard veteran squad to hold objectives, as well as some Incursor squads to hold objectives. And it was a very interesting list. It was a custom chapter, and it leaned into the aspect of their mobility in the pre-game movement, which came into play with my rapid redeployment, which was kind of an interesting takeaway from that. But definitely had a lot more learned from the loss than we did the wins. The wins were close, and there was definitely some things to take away from it, but the real learning lessons were from that loss because I got my teeth kicked in. But we're going to get into the units that we replaced them with, or the ones that we took out, the units that we replaced them with going forward here, and just how we're going to utilize everything that we're going to take away from this. Sadly, for the units that did not make the cut for the new competitive Ultramarine Redux. Starting off the bat, we have the Invader ATV. 80 points getting took out. 8 wounds at T5 toughness. Next up, we got the Primaris Apothecary, 95 points, with a T4 toughness, 5 wounds, 3 up armor save. He did have a relic on him as well as a selfless healer, so that was 2 CP I was putting into him. Marnius Calgar, you had to pay for his Warlord trait, 210 points, 8 wounds of man muscle. Gravis Captain, his little brother with 7 wounds. He had the Sanctic Halo as the relic, and the Warlord trait, Rites of War. So what we're taking away from these guys is going to be the Rites of War for the Gravis Captain, and we're going to be taking away the Selfless Healer and the relic for his Acquittal, which gave him a great 4 damage against infantry pistol shot. But doing so, we got a lot of CP back. We're actually going to be putting Adept of the Codex on the new replacing captain role for our new list. So we're still going to have that revive of 5 CP, but we're actually going to be starting with 9 CP instead of 8, because one of the definitely weaknesses I had was CP usage efficiency, as well as just total CP. So getting 1 back extra helps out, gets you an extra CP for that 5-up refund once per battle round. But we're definitely going to save a lot more points overall. This is 500 points total, 4 models. But you're going to see that everything that it's replaced with has a corresponding unit with it. So the Invader ATVs that we took out, or the 1 I should say, we got replaced by a 3-man Outrider unit. So it's still performing essentially the same duties, just in a different kind of way. A little bit more of a melee opportunity with the Outriders compared to the Invader ATVs. But there's still some shooting there. They have that Bolter discipline, so they can fire 4 shots per bike. That's 12 shots at 30-inch range. Rapid fire all the time. But the big thing with that is that instead of having 1 fast attack slot, which was great for stratagem usage, transhuman, and the reroll 1 aura, both 1 CP, that really gave it some good defensive and offensive potential, especially against infantry. But it's going to make it a little bit harder to kill now with 2 units for my fast attack choices, as well as holding objectives and getting to those far away objectives that I need to, especially late game when you're trying to grab something if you do go turn second with the new FAQ changes. But we're still retaining that captain slot for the Sanctic Halo. That's the only relic we're keeping, as well as the Warlord trait, Adept of the Codex, and that's the only Warlord trait and relic we're using. That way we can maximize that extra CP and not have to spend for any, after spending 3 CP for that Vanguard attachment. Sadly though, seeing the Primaris Apothecary is one of the hardest things to let go of in the list. He was absolutely awesome every single game, except for the loss, and that is why I'm taking him out. During that loss, even though I did get some 6-up feel no pains, he was completely useless in keeping my guys alive. Strictly, in that terms alone for the loss, Ancient would have been better to get the fire again before you die for the Eradicators and the Hellblasters. Let alone the swinging again for, like, let's say a captain or something. But the Primaris Apothecary just doesn't cut it. Yes, he did give me a lot during those wins, but he didn't. I would have been fine even without the revives and the the 6-up Feel No Pains and the healing. So to me, even though he's amazing, I had to take him out, especially to put in what we're going to be putting in here. So let's get into that, and we'll be right back here. Not only are we getting more footprint size, we are going to be getting more units, which is great for objective holding and whatnot, and a lot of other things, but we're also getting a lot more wounds with 10 more wounds as well. So more models, more units, more wounds, more footprint size is great for screening and grabbing objectives. A lot of good stuff, but let's just get into the stat profiles real quick to give you an overview of what we put in. We have the Invictor Warsuit in the middle. That is a 13 wound unit with a T6 toughness and a 3-up armor. We have the Outriders, which are a T5 toughness, 3 model unit with 4 wounds apiece at 150 points with a 3-up armor. And then we have the Primaris Captain there. With the Relic, he's going to have a 3+ invul and 3-up armor save. He's going to have a T4 toughness with 6 wounds. And last but not least, we're going to have the Primaris Tech Marine there. And he's going to have a 2-up armor, as well as a T4 toughness, as well as 5 wounds. So a lot's going into the list. We're going to be increasing all the big things that we're trying to address from the weaknesses of the previous list. Some of those big key points being mobility for not only primary but secondary objectives. Speaking of engage in all fronts, it's also going to be giving us a lot more of that turn 1 firepower. Being the Ultramarines, we're going to rely on shooting a little bit more than most chapters. So we want to make sure that we're doing some crippling surgical blows to the opponent, taking out either their heavy firepower and or big Ghiblies, not necessarily in that order. But not only do we give more firepower with this exchange of models and units, we're going to get more mobility for primaries and secondaries, but we're also getting more durability, so we can stay alive longer if we do not go first. So my loss that I did have, I went second. I went second twice, and I won one of the and lost one of those. But the one I lost showed to me that Primaris Apothecary was pointless for that loss. The 6-up Feel No Pain, even if I saved 2 of them and saved 1 Hellblaster or an Eradicator, it didn't make up for already getting my teeth kicked in for being in a bad position because I was low on units and I had to forward deploy as far as I could. So the Primaris Tech Marine is going to allow us to almost replace that support role with wound replenishment, but on different targets. Especially now that we added in another vehicle, we are going to have 6 big Ghiblies of our own that he can hopefully affect, but not only with his healing abilities, but also his increase in firepower abilities, allowing completely bracketed Redemptor to still shoot on 4s, or even possibly an unbracketed Redemptor shooting on 2s. So he's still giving a lot more support, but not only just for healing, but now for fire as well. So we're increasing our firing potential, as well as total unit size, model size, and wound count. But we are missing out a little bit on melee capabilities with the Gravis Captain. Switch out with the Primaris Captain there. He is modeled with the sword on the display here, but until I get the model without the sword ready and painted up, he will be the proxy. He does not have any melee capabilities at all, but he does have better ranged capabilities with a 36-inch range Stalker, Master Crafted Stalker bolt rifle, giving you a -3 on turn 1 because it is a heavy weapon shot at 3 damage. So it's pretty nice, especially if you pair it with Eliminators, a Vindicare. I think that'd be a nice little choice, but not for this list. That is some kind of a cool idea. But yeah, we have a great amount of units here. We're just trying to maximize the weaknesses of the last list. Another thing to point out is that we're going to be using a lot less relics and warlord traits, which is going to give us an extra CP overall, giving us to 9 CP, because the captain there is going to only have the warlord trait and the relic. Tech Marine, even though he is Master of the Forge, giving you that 3-up always heal 2 vehicles. Once again, hopefully unbracketing some Redemptors, really giving us even more shooting potential. But just 1 relic, 1 warlord trait for the list to give us 9 CP, even though we still have Adept of the Codex to refund some CP, because my god, you can never have enough CP. I never fails to amaze me. But these are the big additions that we're putting in. We'll get to the end of the list and a little bit of conclusions here now. Okay, so welcome to the end of the video. We are shortly going to go over the strengths, weaknesses, and a little bit of the strategy of what we were using for the last list compared to the new list and how we're going to use it going forward. But the big thing from the tournament is that we won 2 matches and we lost 1. The loss was most important to us because that's what we're going to try to gear our changes towards, but keeping in mind that we don't want to change too much of the list to the point where if we were to go back in time and run this new list, yes, we may beat that one opponent we lost to, but if we lose to those 2 other opponents, we have actually done more damage than good for our list. So we want to change just enough, not transform it, but modify it, or just small increment measurements if we can. But getting into it, we want to play to our strengths, which is going to be the shooting power. We want to emphasize that on turn 1, but we always want to have shooting potential somewhere on the board, so we have numerous units to get that with, across from vehicles to infantry to mobile fast attacks to even our HQs now are kind of geared even more towards shooting than they were before. Speaking of strengths that we want to play into for the list and definitely played a factor in the tournament will be our overall durability and how we can take a punch and give a punch back, as well as just staying alive to maybe hold a late game objective. But the durability has definitely been increased. We added in 10 plus wounds, mainly coming from our Invictor here in the back. But we're also adding in another unit on top of him as well in a way. And we're going to be doing that with the combat squad ability from the Hellblasters. So because we're still running a Vanguard only detachment, we want to be making sure that we're filling up all those spots as efficiently as possible. And we already have the Eradicators in one of our heavy spots, so we can't fit in 2 Hellblaster squads for like a battalion with up to 3. So we're going to be combat squatting them, giving us 13 units total compared to the 11 that we had in the last list. More choices for our opponent to have to choose between when we're doing priority, target prioritization and trying to figure out who to kill most, trying not to overkill the opponent and trying to make sure that every shot counts for them. So this can be a little bit harder now. Another part of our list that we want to definitely make note of and address will be the mobility. Now that is, I believe, one of our strengths, but from the tournament and how it performed mobility-wise, it was definitely a weakness. Engaged in all fronts was abysmal. I barely scored any points on it, to the point the last matchup of the tournament, I just chose to not take an engaged in all fronts and just chose the mission from the map itself that you got from the mission pack. So I needed to put more points into it, more units, and more synergies to allow mobility to play a factor for us. So we have the Outriders in here now. Outriders combined with the Invaders is nice because let's say I want to go and peel off just a 5-man chaff unit from the east side of the map. I would just send my 3-man Invader and just destroy it, annihilate it, overkill it, and then I wouldn't have anything left to take the west side of the map where they also put another 5-man chaff unit. Now with the Outriders and Invaders, there's enough shooting power purely from them and shooting/fighting power from them to kind of be equivocable and be a threat to surgically cut out those chaff units that are just holding objectives and nothing else. Talking about Poxwalkers, which are a big meta unit for holding objectives. But another aspect of the mobility that is increased is concealed positions for engage in all fronts with that extra Invictor. That's going to allow us to hopefully hit all 4 quadrants from turn 1 on is the intention. I used rapid redeployment twice out of the 3 matches, and the new goal for this list, because we're also going to be trying to increase CP usage efficiency, will be to stretch the map a little bit with these Invictors and not use rapid redeployment. So we're forcing our opponents to not get so far up on us that we can no longer advance at all. It creates a stopgap at a minimum, but even if they don't address them and they let them stay in those 4 quadrants, that's 3 points a turn. You definitely just kind of stacks up after a while if we can get there. Definitely the biggest question going into the future. Yes, we do get 2 more units. So just like we were talking about with durability, we're going to have an extra full unit here. And then you could say with the combat squad, we're going to have another unit. So that helps us hold more objectives. Maybe I'll leave a Hellblaster squad on that home base objective from now on, and just let them auspex scan anybody that tries to get close, or shoot them at rapid fire range if they try to walk up on them. Okay, so the last aspect of this list that I want to talk about and the strength that we want to play into for it is the CP and CP usage. So as an Ultramarine player, you want to be very acutely aware of your CP, how much you have at all times, and what stratagems you have available to you. You are a jack of all trades, or almost like a Batman in a sense that you have a huge array of tools to utilize in almost any situation against almost any opponent. But to use those, you have to have them in the first place. And to have them, not only are we going to put one extra in the list compared to the last one, so we're going to have 9 compared to 8, we're going to be using less of defensive focus for 2 CP, which I use sometimes 2 times in a game, which is 4 CP. It's insane. I did not get any return on my investment almost every time using it. I have used it before and wiped out opponents, but that was typically with Gilliman giving full rerolls to multiple Dreadnoughts or a Hellblaster unit to do that. So sometimes even spending 3 CP because you get the original unit to fire as well. Just did no return of investment for me, almost. And I would not recommend it unless you have Gilliman. Or maybe a Chapter Master or Calgar giving a full reroll to the opponent getting charged in the first place, but or close to the person for 6 inches for defensive focus. But the other stratagem that we're going to efficiently use a lot more is the Invictor War Suits with rapid redeployment. I used it in the first 2 matches because I planned on using it almost all 3 before going into the tournament, but it was not needed, and I think it was a waste of time, waste of CP usage, and didn't allow me to get any return on that as well. And right then and there, not using those as much, although I still might use both of them in extreme scenarios, won't be the typical usage, will allow me to use fallback and re-engage a lot more than I thought I was going to use that stratagem, and as well as more efficient reroll, command reroll stratagems, as well as other things. Auspex Scan was another one that I wish I had, because even in the one match I did lose, the 1 CP at one point could have given me an Auspex Scan opportunity, which could have kept me in the game, and was the moment of realization when I lost, and of that I wish I wouldn't have not spent it. Maybe a 2 CP on the Hellblasters, because it just wasn't even worth it at the time. But more CP usage, more CP in general, and for that matter, more durability shooting, as well as mobility, is the big aspects of the list that we increased and how we're going to utilize going forward. But I'll let you guys know how it goes. I have a tournament coming up here April 3rd. Sorry this one took me so long. It was 1,000,001 different things going on, but I appreciate it. I had to magnetize the bases because everything was getting broken going to these tournaments, so I just had to do that real quick. But I'll hit you guys back up and let you guys know how we go.